Have you seen my new hair?
Yeah, looks well good. Nice, neat and tidy. Yeah, that looks well good. What about the back? Because the back was curly. Oh,
Was it?
lovely. Yeah, nice and neat.
Turkish barbers. I fucking love a Turkish
Does it
barber.
does it feel nice?
Yeah, always.
Mm.
I always had my hair like this at the sides, didn't I? It was always
Yeah.
longer on top, but I always had it shaved. But I fucking love a Turkish barber. They get the razor and they like razor
Neaten
it
it
all.
off.
Oh, I love it.
It's well nice.
Yeah.
Should take Puppy to a Turkish barber. She's
Yeah.
a Turkish delight, isn't she?
Uh-huh.
Mm. Go
Yeah.
Turkey.
But so if Graham's out, he comes up to the window. We've got a little flower box thing outside our window, like in our front room window. And he just comes up and he looks at you straight away, and then he starts scratching at the window to be let in. And I'm like, oh yeah. But
There he is.
both the cats were in yesterday, and his cat jumps up to the window and just looks in. And I was like looking around, counting 1, 2. But I was like, what the fuck cat is this?
Hang on, we don't have 3. Do we?
And it was a black and white cat as well. Turns out Graham's mate. He was knocking to see if Graham was allowed out.
Yeah, knocking for Graham.
Yeah. Come to the window. This bird's coming out today. Meow. Meow. Morning.
Morning.
Morning. It's normally the other
Oh,
way
hang on.
around, isn't it?
I
It's
don't
normally...
normally say. Oh, I
Yeah.
don't. Hang on. Do that again. Morning.
Morning.
That's better.
Yeah, I know. We did it. It was like Ant and Deck, saying Deck and Ant. That wasn't wrong, was it? Okay, so
What's been happening?
nothing really. And I've noticed as well that generally when you put in those funny stories at the beginning, they're just our ramblings before we start the story. And then you just clip them in. So they're not like, they're just me and you chatting. And it's always me that's talking absolute shit. It's never you.
That's because I do the editing. Take all mine out.
Put my really rubbish stories in for everyone to listen to.
I like it.
Yeah. So I can only apologise to everybody. Well, on a different note, we, after our shout out for our buy us a coffee.
Oh, please don't say we've got another one like that.
No, but I have had a few people say, how do we donate? What is buy us a coffee and how do we donate?
No, because that's why they want to do it. And it'll land on my turn.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully that's nice.
So if you do want to donate, then the link is always in the episode notes. So if you click on wherever you're listening, if you click on the episode, there's always the description. And if you then expand the description, all of the relevant links are in that bit of description there. So
what if I'm driving listening to this? Can't click on anything. It's against the law. Can't touch your phone. So what then, Sarah?
Wait till fucking get home. What are you doing?
What if I forget? I'm the voice of the people.
Listen, if you don't want to donate, that's fine. But for the people that have asked how they go about donating, then that is how you do it, and we greatly appreciate it.
Oh, that's good. We can do a QR code.
Oh, really?
That's handy.
Okay.
Download your QR code. Oh, that's well good. We should get that on some shit.
We should get that on some shit.
Get that on some shit.
So anyways, if you have listened to the past 2, this is episode 3 of our the girl with no name story. And if you haven't, you can't just jump straight into part 3. You can't. So you're going to have to go back and listen to part 1 and then part 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2, please do, because you can't just jump into part 3. It's like starting at book 4 in the Harry Potter sequel. You're you're missing relevant information. You can't just start midway through.
Mm.
So go back and listen to part 1 and part 2 because they are full of excitement,
Full of monkeys.
full of monkeys.
Full of
I just restarted that whole bit so that we could stop the bit.
Oh, you just said it again.
You're the reason you have so much editing to do.
Sorry.
Goodness gracious. So we ended part 2 with Marina having escaped the brothel. Why are you smirking? What's is this how this is going to go again? I'm like a naughty kid today.
I just wanted to say again.
I know, but I don't know if we're allowed to say.
Well, we're not. Come on, Dad. Get on with it.
So part 2 ended with Marina escaping the brothel.
She legged it, didn't she?
She did. She legged it. Yep. And she legged it barefoot as fast as she could towards the open doorway and out onto the streets of Colombia. So part 3 starts with Marina still on the run. So she's come out of the brothel and she's running like she's never run before. And
Like
she's
Forrest
sure,
Gump.
like for run, Forrest. So Marina was sure that somebody would be chasing her. She thought that Anna Carmen would be after her, but she didn't even stop to check. She just ran and she ran and she ran. And she said she ran for what seemed like hours. And the buildings began to get close. They began to be like more buildings. So it's running into a more built up area, and she said cars began to get more frequent and the city noise began to grow louder, and before she knew it she'd run right into the violent city centre of, I think it's pronounced Cucuta.
No, that's not where you want to be, is it?
No, nope. And so she found herself at San Antonio Park, which was this big expanse of greenery, and it was surrounded by bushes and trees. And she immediately felt safer there than she had in a long time.
Oh.
And she looked around the park for a place that she could sleep in the canopy of the trees, because that's what she was used to doing. But it wasn't dense enough. She couldn't find a decent spot. So what she did instead was she found herself a patch of flooring underneath an old mango tree. And she just curled up there. And she laid there, just like her feet were aching, her legs were aching. So she just laid there and kind of, once the panic had begun to subside, she started to actually take in her surroundings. And she noticed that she wasn't alone at all. Under trees, just like she was, were other children, just like her. And she said that upon seeing these other children, she began to feel better. And she'd felt so alone at the brothel. And now she was surrounded by other children that were in the same boat that she was. And it was almost like a great comfort to her to know that all these other children were homeless and sleeping under this tree just like she was. So she quickly fell asleep under this mango tree, and she said that that was the best sleep she'd had in ages. So when Marina woke up the next morning, she said she realized that she was back in the jungle, but it was a different kind of jungle. It was a deadlier jungle than what she was used to. And she would soon learn that the streets of Colombia were no safe place for a child. They were riddled with predators, but of a different kind. So she was used to predators in the jungle, but this is something she wasn't used to.
Yeah, because you were saying about the sex trafficking was prevalent.
Really prevalent. So whereas before she was used to fleeing from the dangers that the jungle brought, so like finding food she was used to doing and keeping safe, and she now had to adapt those skills to avoid being gang raped, robbed, beaten, shot, and getting caught by the police. Because to be a street child of Colombia was to be a gamina, and gamina was a Colombian word, which was almost like vermin for street children. They weren't looked upon kindly.
Isn't that the word for prawn?
What? Gamina?
Oh no, it's gambas.
It's not even close.
Well, it's street prawn.
Are you just trying to get more airtime because you haven't had a story in the last 3
No,
minutes?
I'm tired. I'm really, really tired. This is what
Right, okay.
happens.
Just
All right,
say stupid things.
street prawn. Hang on, I'll mute myself.
Thank you. Street prawn.
Yeah, go on. She was a street prawn.
She was a street prawn. Oh, this poor woman. She's been through so much and now she's being bloody ridiculed by you.
No, so sorry, I won't call her a prawn.
Okay. So Marina's first day as a street child was very similar to her first day in the jungle. She wanted to find food, but instead of having to walk far to find it like she did in the jungle, Marina found that the streets of Colombia were full of food. You just had to be good at stealing it.
Ah,
Which we know that she was.
yeah, like Aladdin, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas most of the street children would be seen climbing into bins and eating leftovers and things like that, Marina had been developing her skills as a thief ever since she'd lived in the jungle, and she was really good at it. Something that she always did. The monkeys always stole food, and she was used to having to fend for herself and things. She didn't need to rifle through the bins for leftovers when she could steal freshly made plates of food from restaurants.
Oh,
so Marina
ballsy, isn't it?
Marina made it a habit to kind of like stake out the nicest restaurants in town. And she said that because she was so small, she was almost like looked over. So she could actually hide behind people or behind chairs, and she was used to hiding from things in the jungle. So she could make herself really kind of insignificant. And so what she would do is she would wait for the chefs to put the plates of food on the counters. You know, when they put it up there, they ding the bell.
Oh, yeah.
And they're ready to be taken. And then she would leg it in and she would steal this plate of food. And then she would run off with it. She was very quick, very stealthy, very agile. So although she was seen, people saw her doing this, she wasn't caught, and she'd be seen too late. They'd be like, oh, she's already got the food. I'm not going to chase after her. She's like a little monkey.
Yeah.
Running on all fours. But she was just too quick. So she dined very well.
Nice.
So she actually developed a trick as well to rob wealthy women of their shopping. So what she would do is she would sneak up behind them and she'd pull their skirts down.
Yeah.
So the women would automatically drop these shopping bags so that they were sort of fumbling around trying to quickly pull up their skirts.
Yeah.
And then Marina would just swoop in, pick up the bags and leg it.
That's clever.
Yeah. So not only was she fast, she had the added ability of being able to climb. So she would jump over fences and make her escape, or she would climb up trees and then watch from above as people were sort of like, where did she go? Where she was just
what
here.
just happened?
Where is she? So she would sort of look down and be like, up the tree. So her time in the jungle had served her well for being able to steal food and find food. And one thing that it hadn't prepared her for were some of the choices that she would need to make as a street child. So to escape the life of a street child, or, you know, to escape the threat of violence and, you know, be these gangs and things like this, many of her street friends chose a life of crime, or a life of prostitution, a life of drugs. Many people turned that way. And Marina said that she always had this sense of wanting more for herself. She wanted a family, and she wanted a husband, and she wanted a house. And so she could see all around her where all of her friends had chosen this life of prostitution and drugs and crime, and she could see what happened to them, and that wasn't what she wanted. So she knew that this was temporary, her life on the streets, and she would find a way to get the family that she'd always dreamed of. She was very headstrong, and in the book she's written about it, and she said looking back on herself at that age, she has no idea where she got this strength from, or that, you know, she just knew not to take the easy route, I guess. So Marina remembers falling asleep on a park bench one night and being woken like roughly by a shining light in her eyes and this rough hand shaking her and telling her to wake up. And she immediately went into this fight mode, and she said she went into monkey mode in the in the book. That's what she said. She went into monkey mode, and she tried to fight these people that had woken her up, and she tried to, get them off her. And she noticed that they were policemen, so she was eventually bundled into the back of a police van and driven to the police station, where she was left in a single room with a table. And she was then joined by one of the policemen that had woken her up. And he, of course, started by asking her what her name is. And she said, I don't really have a name. So she knew that Anna Carmen had given her the name Gloria, but she'd left that behind when she left the brothel. She felt that the name Gloria was associated with being stupid and being mocked, and she hated the name.
Being
that
in a
wasn't
place
her
that
name.
she wasn't happy
Yeah.
as well, isn't it?
And it was always, at the brothel, they always said like Gloria Estupido and things like that. So that's kind of how she associated it. So she'd left that name behind, and she didn't want anybody to call her Gloria. So she said that she didn't have a name. And the policeman was obviously like, you must have a name.
Yeah.
But she didn't. So they asked her what the other street kids called her, and they did call her something. So she told the policeman what the other street kids called her, and she told them that her name on the street was Pony Malta. So Pony Malta in Colombia at the time, I don't know whether it still is. I was going to actually look it up, but I've completely forgotten. It was a drink, and it was a dark coloured drink in a small and skinny glass bottle. So the street kids had said that that's what Marina would look like, that she'd look like this drink. So that became her name on the streets, Pony Malta. So of course the policeman didn't believe that she didn't have a real name, or that she didn't have a home to go to, and they kept pressing her for information. So she eventually told them about the jungle and her time with the monkeys, and you can imagine how that went down. So the policemen that laughed at her, and they mocked her and told her how absolutely ridiculous that was, and they reprimanded her for making up such stories. So Marina decided from that day she would never tell another person about her time in the jungle. Marina was kept in the police station only for that night, and then she was released the next day. I think she was on the streets for about a year or so. And although she was really good at stealing food, it was never easy for her. She never knew where her next meal was going to be, and she was often hungry and cold. There's nowhere for her to sleep and things.
She hasn't got all those warm monkeys round her. And
exactly. And it was a life of, like, where she was in the center, there was criminals absolutely everywhere. So she was always worried about where to sleep in case she woke up and was getting beaten or raped. A lot
more
something
dangerous there, I would have thought.
Yeah, that's what she said. She thought she was in a jungle again, but it was a more dangerous jungle. She was a lot safer actually in the jungle than she was on the streets of Colombia.
Yeah.
So what she would try and do eventually was that she would try and get herself a job, and she tried to get herself a job at the restaurant that she was always stealing from. So they recognized her. So what she did, she stood out the back one night, just waiting for the waitress to come out, bring out the bags of rubbish and things like that. And she asked the woman if, in exchange for work, she could be paid in food. So it was almost like a bargain. I'll stop coming in and stealing food if you let me work for you and just give me the food instead. She didn't want any money for it. She just wanted food without having to steal for it. So she had done that sort of work in the brothel. She'd done the washing up, and she'd cleaned the kitchens, and she'd mopped the floors and things. So she wasn't good at it. She always said she was never very good at it, but she worked hard. And she didn't want to spend all of her time stealing and being hungry and not knowing where her next meal was going to come from. So it was eventually agreed that Marina would start working in the kitchens. and she was quite obviously filthy. And they'd said to her that you can't work in the kitchens being filthy. It's not sanitary. So they kind of hosed her down and scrubbed her up and things. And she was given shoes and clean clothes to wear only while she worked in the restaurant. Once she finished work, she'd have to give them all back. But that wasn't enough for Marina. She began to resent having to go to work all day, every day. She was probably 11 or 12 at the time, and her street friends could come and go as they pleased and spend the day however they wanted. And Marina would wake up early, she would go to work, and she'd often be so tired from her day at work, and then obviously being fed, she would just leave work, find a place to sleep, and then wake up and go and do the same thing again. So she felt trapped. So she would eventually leave the restaurant, and that security of having the food and a bellyful every day, and she went back to stealing. And Marina remembers a time that she was going through some bins looking for something, and she said that oftentimes you could find something to sell. So it wasn't just food that she was looking for anything that she could to sell, because then she would have money and she'd be able to buy whatever she wanted with it. So what she found in this bin was something that looked a bit like a money tin, like a little square box, and it had like a little lock, not a padlock, but like a little lock at the front, and a slot at the top that looked as though you would put money in it, like coins and things. When she shook the box, it rattled. So she was dead excited to have found this little box that had money in it, and she was sort of kind of imagining how she would spend the money, and she was really excited by it. So she kind of stood by the bin trying to jimmy this lock open, when two much older, much larger street children saw her with the box. And despite all of her monkey mode aggression and anger, she was tiny. She was so tiny and skinny, and she was no match for these older boys, and they stole the box from her. So once they'd stolen the box, she immediately gave chase. She wanted this box. You know, that's what she'd found, and she wanted this money in the box. And she was fast, so she might not have been particularly strong, but she was fast, and she was sure she would catch up with these two boys. So she chased these boys for ages, and then they eventually managed to kind of, one boosted the other one over the fence, and then the other one helped that one over the fence. So it was, although she was good at climbing, she couldn't climb over this fence. There was nowhere for her to climb over it. So they'd kind of then jumped over the fence and ran underneath like underneath a bridge, so in a secluded area underneath a bridge. And she watched from afar as these boys were trying to prise open this little box. And she was wishing that, like, she was cursing her bad luck, and she was wishing that she'd found it sooner, and she'd wished that she'd managed to open it sooner. And she was kind of hoping actually what was inside the box wasn't money, because then she wouldn't feel so bad about having to lose it. And so she stood and she watched. And she watched as these two boys managed to break open the lock. And she watched as they excitedly opened their prize. And she watched as the homemade bomb inside of it went off. And she watched as it blew apart their bodies and the bridge above. And she watched as pieces of the bridge and body rained down all around her.
Oh my, I did not expect anything like that. I was thinking maybe it's like drugs, maybe it was like a syringe that was rattling around, maybe it's plastic tokens, or I was thinking maybe it's marbles. I was thinking of all these different things that it could have been. I did not expect that. That is horrendous.
Yep. She just always manages to escape.
Yeah, she's got a guardian angel.
She's got some sort of guardian angel. But can you imagine? She was so devastated about having this box stolen from her. But she
thought,
but she was like shell shocked for ages. It took her so long to recover from that, because she, you know, watched the devastation of what happened to these two boys. And it's very descriptive in the book about what happened. Very descriptive. After that day, Marina decided that she needed to do something to change her situation. She didn't want to live her life in fear like that. So what she decided to do was she just started knocking on doors in the more expensive part of town. So all these big, massive houses and things like that. So she would knock on the door, and she would offer her services as a maid or like a servant in exchange for a place to stay and food. She didn't want any money. She just wanted a safe place to stay and to be fed. And she would, be a servant.
Yeah.
So after weeks and weeks of rejection, she found a family that would take her in.
Oh.
But what she didn't know is that this family was one of the most notorious criminals in Colombia at the time.
Of course it was.
Of course it was.
Can't just find a nice, quiet family to that will look after her and settle down.
Oh, no.
Oh, she's going to get in all sorts of stuff now.
So upon entering the Santos home, she was, of course, asked her name. So she told the family that her name was Pony Malta, which they obviously refused to call her that. So they decided to rename her. So she was to be known as Rosalba.
Rosalba.
They're like Essex language.
Rosalba. All right, Gil. That's exactly how it went down. She was known as Rosalba. All right, Gil. Coming in.
Well, she's just moved into a criminal's house, so that
she hasn't moved into the East End.
She's now living with the Crays.
Yeah.
And that was a good job. I'm going to continue to call her Marina.
No, okay.
But she was given another name for another life change. Rosalba.
Rosalba.
So
Marina. It's difficult, isn't it, dealing with me when I'm tired?
So difficult.
I know, sorry.
So another name for another life change, but this wasn't to be such a drastic life change from her time at the brothel. She was treated awfully by the Santos family, and she was beaten often. She was fed scraps and she was made to sleep on the floor. And worst of all is that she couldn't escape this house. The Santos family kept their doors locked at all times and windows locked, absolutely everything, because it's a notorious criminal family. They were very private about their affairs.
Yes.
So she knew that she had no hope of ever escaping and living to tell the tale, because she essentially was a witness in this house. So if she was to escape, she knew that she would be hunted, because the conversations that she'd overheard and things like that, she knew that the Santos family would not let her out of their sight. So day in, day out, she served the Santos family, feeling as trapped as ever. Her only escape was actually in the garden, in the Santos family garden, where she would climb the tree and just sit for hours watching into the neighbour's garden. And in the neighbour's garden, she would watch this elderly woman going about her chores, and she had some grown-up children, she had some younger children as well, but she felt like she did in the jungle with the Indian woman, and like she did with the hunter that came in, she felt drawn to this neighbor woman, and she felt that she was warm and she felt comforted by her face. And like I say, she had children as well, and the children were happy, and so she would just sit and she'd watch this family and she'd watch the children play and laugh, and she just longed to join them. So she was like 12, so she was a child still.
She wanted to be a child, didn't she? And I think the monkeys probably
allowed that mischief.
That sort of childish behavior. And because kids are like little monkeys, aren't they?
Yeah.
So she had that, and now she's sort of lost it, and she's been thrown into this hideous, dirty adult world.
Yeah. After spending weeks on end watching this family, she said that the need for recognition grew in her, and like she wanted to do with the hunter, she wanted to be found out, and she did it with the Indian lady as well, and she wanted to show
Mm.
herself. She decided to climb down a little bit lower in her tree
Mm.
and try to be seen by this older woman. And at some point, their eyes met, and Marina was given this lovely, warm smile, but
Oh.
also a finger of silence.
Oh.
This woman had gone, shh,
Not the finger.
no, not the
Good.
finger, but like a finger to her lips for everybody
Oh.
that doesn't watch the YouTube video of silence. And Marina understood that she wasn't to be caught talking to this woman. There would be consequences for them both if she was found out. So
Mm.
they would eventually come up with their own way of communicating silently. And Marina learned that her new friend's name was Maruja.
Oh.
And I tried to say that as poshly as I could, and I didn't want to butcher it by going Maruja. So
Maruja.
Maruja. So I'm gonna call her Maruja. So talking to Maruja in her tree became an obsession for Marina, and she longed for the time that she was free of her chores, and she would go about her day as quickly as she
Mm.
could, so that she would go and sit and wait in her tree for Marusha to come out and then silently communicate with her.
Oh.
And Marusha knew her pain. She heard her screams and her tears, and she knew that the Santos family beat her. And she said that sometimes Marina was so hurt that Marusha would hear her in pain trying to climb up the tree to
Oh.
go and sit and talk to her. But although Maruja knew the situation, she didn't dare help Marina
No.
for fear of being caught. She had a family of her own, and she didn't want to interfere.
Mm.
Hearing Marina's screams and cries day after day was too much for Maruja, and she knew that she wouldn't be able to take Marina in. There's no way for her to hide her, and no way for her to get her out the Santos family home and then hide her in her home. So she formulated a plan.
Mm.
She told Marina to find a way to escape the house and to meet her at San Antonio Park. So she told her the time and day to meet her, and then said it had to be then or never.
Oh.
So when that day come, Marina was desperate to find a way to escape. The door was locked shut. There was no other way out for her. All of the family was in the home. At the time to meet Maruja was getting closer and closer, and Marina still had no plan of escape. She had no way out of the house. So she decided to empty out the fuel for the cooker, and she detached the pipes and took this liquid and poured it away. And then she then took the empty container to Mrs. Santos and said, oh, we're out of oil. I'm not going to be able to cook dinner for everybody. So Mrs. Santos agreed that Marina could leave the house to go and pick up some more oil.
Oh, she's so smart.
Yeah, I know.
That's super smart doing that.
Uh-huh. So
Clever
she would normally be allowed out of the house to go and run errands and things like that, but Marina never thought about escaping because she was so terrified of being found. Like she didn't want to go back on the street. So so it wasn't uncommon for her to have to go out and restock and things like that. So Marina was given some money actually to even go out and get this oil. So Marina, she took this opportunity and prayed that Maruja was still at the park waiting for her. And so she ran as fast as she could. And when she got there, she got to the park, she found Maruja waiting for her in a taxi. And Marina didn't know it, but Maruja's plan to get her away from the Santos family was to take her to a convent.
Oh.
She said to Marina that no one could harm her while she was at the convent. That was a safe place for her. But once she was there, she wouldn't be able to leave. The nuns said to her that if Marina agreed to be taken in by the nuns would look after her and provide her with safety and things like that. But in
Nun her up.
return, her up. In return, she had to like be part of this sanctuary. She couldn't leave it.
Mm.
And Marusha said to Marina that she would visit her every Saturday because she was Marina's only friend.
Yeah.
So for now, she had no choice. Anything was better than living with the Santos family.
Yeah.
Or so she thought.
Oh God.
So now living at the convent, Marina felt trapped again. She hated the nuns. She hated the rules, and she just didn't understand rules. She said that she still doesn't understand rules. She's like, why do I have to eat with a fork? Why can't I eat with my hands? What's the issue?
That sounds like all kids everywhere.
Yeah, what she hated rules.
Yeah.
And she hated having to pray to God as well. She had never understood religion. And I think religion in Colombia at the time was massive. So
Mm.
every place that she had frequented, there was always religion there, but she'd never understood it. Her thoughts were,
Mm.
why would a God have abandoned her in the
Yeah.
jungle? Why would he allowed all of these things to have happened to her?
Yeah. She's witnessed a few deaths as well, isn't she?
Yeah.
Like she's witnessed the hunters going in and, taking babies, the baby monkeys and the
Hmm.
mother monkeys dying. She was in that car crash where
Yep.
three of the other people died.
Yep.
Seen two street kids get blown up. So, and she's by this age, she must only
Like
be
12 or 13.
12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she resented staying with the nuns, but she looked forward to the weekends that Marusha was to come and visit.
Mm.
She'd built up this relationship with her, and she said she genuinely loved her. She loved Marusha and she trusted her, and she was the only person in the world that she had. And the thought of seeing her again or every Saturday was what got her through that first week until Saturday came and Marusha didn't.
Oh no.
So she was devastated. And she'd assumed maybe that she'd been held up. It'd been a long journey
Mm.
from where they were to get to the convent. So maybe she just couldn't make it. So she waited for another week for the following Saturday to come, hoping that Marusha would also. But she still didn't.
Mm.
So week after week, Marina hoped desperately to be able to see her friend again. And she was worried as well that something had happened to her, that the Santos family had got to her, and
That's what I'm
she was
worried about.
worried. So she'd got a lot of anger by this time. So she began to be mischievous, like she was at the
Mm.
brothel. And she began to act out and be mischievous and play tricks on the nuns and things like that. And
She didn't
the
start
nuns
putting the nun skirts down, did she?
not
Imagine
quite.
that wouldn't go down well.
So, but obviously to reprimand her, the nuns would beat her.
Brilliant.
But she didn't care. I mean, she wasn't beaten as badly as she was with the Santos family. So
Was she
but
standing there going, "Is that all you got?"
Yeah. Oh, bless her.
Oh.
One evening though, she decided to break into the nuns' sleeping quarters
No.
to steal a pair of their underwear.
Oh
So
dear.
that her and some of the other women that were living in the convent could all have a good laugh, and they all kind of discussed what sort of underwear that the nuns might wear and things like that, because you can imagine, as children would do. So she decided, you know what, let's go and have a look. She was obviously caught and severely reprimanded.
Oh.
So she eventually formulated a plan of escape. She couldn't stay at the convent. She hated the convent. She said that's not what she wants for her life. She
Yeah.
doesn't want to grow up in the convent. She wants this family, and she wanted to get back to Marusha as well. Like I say, she was really worried about what the Santos family might have done for her. So she decided to pretend that there was a fire in the church that was kind of furthest away from the outer wall where she wanted to get to. And she'd found a place on this wall where there was just a small section that was kind of divoted out, where she had some handholds and things like that she would be able to climb up. It was tall wall. She would lure everybody to the furthest point away from this wall by saying that there was a fire. And she thought that that would give her enough time to be able to scale the wall before anybody really noticed. So that's what she did. So she screamed fire, everybody went running, and she legged it in the other direction. And she started to climb the wall. And she got almost to the top before she realised that there was barbed wire all across the top.
Oh no.
And so while she was kind of suspended there, trying to decide what to do and how to get over the barbed wire, the nuns had realised that there was no fire and that Marina was planning something. It was Marina that had led them there. And so they decided to look for her. And they found her at the top of this wall. So in her panic, she just threw herself over the wall.
Oh God.
Over the barbed wire, threw herself over the wall, and she landed on both feet. And she said the impact sent shooting pains all the way up her legs.
That just turned my belly over when you said that.
I know. It was so high, so high. And she heard that the big convent gates were opening and the nuns were running around trying to search for her. But instead of running, Marina did what she did best. And she climbed to the top of the tallest tree and she waited. And she waited for the nuns to cease their search and to give up. And they were all sort of spread out looking for her and things like that, and didn't look up in the trees because why would you?
Yeah.
And like I say, she didn't tell anybody about her time with the monkeys. So
of course. So they wouldn't even think that.
Nope. Nobody knew. Marusha didn't know. So she waited up in this tree for all of the nuns to give up their search and go back inside, and she waited for the gate to close behind them. And then she got down and she began to search her way back to Marusha. And she didn't know the way, and she had no idea where she was going or where she needed to get to. She would just hop onto the back of buses and lorries and caught rides from them backwards and forwards, and until she found somewhere that started to look familiar. So she would just walk endlessly for hours and things, and kind of retracing her steps backwards and forwards. And she began to recognize certain areas. So once she was back in familiar territory, she was terrified of being spotted by the Santos family. She knew that if they spotted her, they would kill her. And she was really scared and she didn't want to go anywhere near the house. So what she did instead was she found a street child and she bribed him to go and knock on Marusha's house and kind of asked him to make sure that Marusha came to San Antonio Park where Marina was waiting. So Marusha was obviously shocked to see that Marina was there and that she had escaped this convent of nuns. And she was terrified for her. And she told Marina that the Santos family had people out looking for her and they wanted her dead. They actively had people searching for her. And she kind of said to Marina, you need to go back to the convent. That's where it's safest. You're not safe here. You need to go back to the convent. But Marina didn't want to go back to the convent. So she told Marusha that the nuns beat her and that she refused to go back. So faced with no other option and not wanting to be seen out in the open, Marusha smuggled Marina back to her house until she could decide what to do with her.
Well, that's risky, isn't it? Blimey.
So risky.
Yeah.
So risky. And she said to Marina, do not move, do not speak, just hide in this spot and don't steal anything.
Don't touch anything.
Don't touch anything. So what she decided was that Marina would stay with one of Marusha's eldest daughters, Maria, in Bogota. God, there's so many names beginning with M. I'm going to get so confused. So Marusha had contacted her daughter, Maria, and agreed that Marina would be able to stay with her. Once all the plans were made, Marusha snuck Marina out of the house and onto a plane with only a photo of her for her belongings, and the photo was of Marusha's daughter Maria. so that she knew who she would be meeting at the airport.
This is going to get well confusing, isn't it?
I know.
Marina, and Maria.
Oh, don't worry. I've got this.
You got it.
Got this.
Doing a great job.
Thank you. So Marina was on the aeroplane on her way to see Maria. And it's crazy to think that you didn't need a passport or any kind of paperwork.
Or anything. Yeah.
Nothing to get on, just a plane ticket to get on the plane.
Plane ticket and a little photograph, and that's it.
Yeah, plane ticket and a photograph. And that's what she did. She got on the plane and she left Maruja behind. And she left the streets of Colombia behind. She left the brothel behind. She left the jungle behind. And she started her new life in Bogota as a nanny for Maria's children.
But she was a nanny in Bogota.
Yeah.
Nanny, goat.
Oh, I see what you've done there.
Well, I didn't. You said it.
Oh.
Coincidence? Maybe.
Maybe. But Maria was lovely to Marina, and she welcomed her and she cared for her. And she allowed her to sleep in the same room as her daughter, Nancy, who was closest in age to Marina.
Oh,
and so although Marina now was more settled than she'd ever been, she wasn't happy. And she began to have terrible nightmares and flashbacks and of the Santoses beating her and whipping her, and nightmares of people chasing her or finding her. And it got so bad that she was afraid to go to sleep. So when Maria found out about these nightmares, she spoke to Marina and she said that she had an idea of something that might help. And so she asked her who had given her her name. And Marina said that the Santos family had. And so she asked her who had given her her name before that. And she said that the street children had. And she said that the name before that had been given to her by Anna Carmen. And then the name before that, she didn't know. She didn't know what her name was. She didn't know what her name was supposed to be. So she told
the
Marina,
monkeys call her?
Probably something. I don't know. So she told Marina that the only names she had ever known had been slave names and been given to her by people that were awful to her, and she needed to leave that life behind. So she told Marina that she needed to choose a new name, one for herself. And after a few days of deciding, Maria brought Marina to the church, and she was baptized as part of the family. And she went into the church as a nameless orphan and came out of the church named Luz Marina, aged probably 13 to 14, now part of a family. Luz meaning light and Marina meaning sea. And she said that she didn't know why she had chosen those names, but she just felt a connection to them. And she thought that perhaps maybe Marina could have been her mother's name or somebody that she had once known. She just felt a really strong connection to this name. So she had a renewed sense of self and felt freer than she'd ever done before.
Yeah.
And she felt like she'd been born again. And that is this story of Marina Chapman.
That was so good. I was so into that story. It's crazy story. I didn't think that I would feel like this, but I do kind of think she would have been like, the best part was pretty much when she got left with the monkeys in the forest, in the jungle.
Yeah.
Because although she was really young and it was really difficult, she wasn't really in, like, she was cared for by the monkeys. She wasn't really in massive amounts of danger.
Who would think that the jungle would have been safer than the streets of Colombia?
Yeah, I would go into the rainforest.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd die in there, but
you wouldn't come out.
No, I wouldn't come out, but I'd go in.
So Marina eventually would marry, and she has children And she now, I believe she lives in the UK. She lives in
Oh, does
Bradford.
she?
Yep,
Bradford.
Bradford.
I need to know what that is because that sounds
Yeah.
really familiar.
I don't think it's too far, but it was actually her
Mad.
daughters that had urged her to kind of tell her story and write her book. So Marina had never really told her story. And like she said, after she'd been laughed at by the policeman, she didn't really tell anybody. It was only that, as her children were growing up, that she would say things about the jungle, or she would do things that were, monkey-like or something.
Yeah.
And her daughters were fascinated by her life and kind of
Bet they were.
put it into some sort of chronology. And Marina still kind of, I mean, for the children, it was normal to see their mum climbing trees and things like that. And they said that it was only until she went to school and started hanging around with other children that she noticed that their mum didn't climb trees. Their mum didn't do these things, and they realized how unique their mum was, and
Yeah.
that they urged her to kind of write this story. And like I think I said in the first episode, they gauged her age and her time in the jungle by how
Like the
quickly her
hair
hair
growth.
grew. And
Yeah.
yeah, so they helped her put this book together and write the timeline. And they've been back to some of these places as well. She said she's never been able to find the location in the jungle where the monkeys were. She's been back to the jungle, but she's never been able to find that bit. But she's been back to the brothel, which I think was kind of knocked down, and she's been back to where the Santos family lived, and back to that street of Colombia where she spent some of her time as a street child.
Have we heard any news about Anaconda?
No.
No.
No, and I even tried to find information about the two children that were blown up with the bridge. I tried to find information about that as well, but turns out there's a lot of bombings a lot of bridges getting blown up in Colombia.
Yeah, that's hideous, isn't it?
Yeah, so I
Blimey.
couldn't find any information on that either. And I did have a gentleman actually email us to say what the name of those little green bananas were.
Oh, okay.
Um
Awesome. What's his first name?
uh
I don't know if we're allowed to.
Jim.
Jim. Oh, thanks, Jim.
Yeah, he said they're called ladyfingers, and he said they are delicious.
Oh, that's cool.
That is what they are called. I said I found pictures of them, but I haven't been able to find what they were called. But
Oh, that's great.
yeah, and that's what she kind of lived on for most of her time in the jungle. If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.